Folks, welcome to According to Sam. This is episode 213. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys had a great weekend. I'm going to pick up on where I left off in the last podcast. We're talking about politics, talking about the race for the White House. We're talking about Joe Biden and the decisions that he and the people around him, his campaign, they're making to ensure that he wins re-elections. And he's making tons of different calculations. We're going to talk about his speech that he did yesterday at Morehouse. One of the places where he's bleeding, as we said in the last podcast, was with voters of color, particularly Black voters and Hispanic voters. Young voters are not feeling Joe Biden, and it's a big problem. So he did a speech at Morehouse yesterday where he showed up in Atlanta with a little hot sauce. I like to call it hot sauce. But in the last podcast, I was explaining how this election is a real David and Goliath moment, that everybody is on Joe Biden's side. He has everything on his side. He has the money. He has the big corporate interests. He has the Justice Department. He has the media. He has the fact that he's an incumbent president. And what those things, the advantages of being an incumbent president. I mean, he has the entire government as the incumbent president on his side. So he is definitely the Goliath in this analogy, and this is a David and Goliath moment. But and Joe Biden, and like I was saying, with all this money, all of this huge team around him that is gathering all this data and making decisions, and every move that Joe Biden is making is calculated. And like I was saying in the last podcast, it's kind of cringe, some of the things he was doing, especially like this hot sauce that he showed up with in Atlanta when he gave his speech yesterday at Morehouse. And I like to call it hot sauce, where I get the name hot sauce from. And hot sauce is the name that I've given to any time a politician shows up to Black audiences and they pander, overtly pander to Black audiences to get their vote. And I call it hot sauce. And the term hot sauce came from this interview that Hillary Clinton did in 2016 with the Breakfast Club. And this is why I coined pandering to Black voters, white politicians pandering to Black voters, hot sauce. Take a listen.
What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you getting information right now?
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce in my bag, swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yes.
Now listen, I want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to Black people.
Pandering to Black people.
Okay. Is it working?
Just shameless. Just shameless. They even made a song about Hillary Clinton and the hot sauce.
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce in my bag.
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce in my bag?
I got hot sauce in my bag.
Really?
Yes. Hot sauce.
I got hot sauce in my bag.
Hot
Just
sauce.
shameless.
Hot sauce in my bag?
I got hot sauce in my bag.
Really?
Yes. Hot sauce.
Hot sauce. So Joe Biden showed up at Morehouse yesterday with some hot sauce, and I clipped the 5 minutes. This is Joe Biden's entire, I guess it was 27 minutes. The speech was just under a half hour, and this is a 5-minute highlight clip of Joe Biden's hot sauce speech to the graduates there at Morehouse. Take a listen.
Set foot for freedom, from slavery to freedom, an institution of higher learning, that would become Morehouse College. But then everything changed. One of my heroes, and he was my hero, a Baptist minister, a Morehouse man, Dr. Martin Luther King. In April of my law school graduation year, he was murdered. My city of Wilmington, and we were, to our great shame, a slave state, and we were segregated. Delaware erupted into flames when he was assassinated, literally. We're the only city in America where the National Guard patrolled every street corner for 9 full months with drawn bayonets, the longest stretch of any American city since the Civil War. It was a reckoning on race.
Oh, no, I moved it back. I moved it up too far.
You missed your high school graduation. You started college just as George Floyd was murdered.
And listen, you're using George Floyd.
It was a reckoning on race. It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you. What is democracy? If black men are being killed in the street, what is democracy? The trail of broken promises still leave black communities behind. What is democracy? You have to be 10 times better than anyone else to get a fair shot. And most of all, what does it mean, as we've heard before, to be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure?
Wow, to be a black man who loves his country, even if this country doesn't love him back in equal measure. And he's just shameless.
Hot sauce. Hot sauce.
Hot sauce in my bag.
Just shameless are these people. What is he talking about? I love this tweet. This guy, he tweeted this out and got a lot of response from it. It says, imagine working hard for years to graduate from college, and Joe Biden shows up on your day of celebration to remind you that you are a victim and America doesn't love you because you're black. That's what Joe Biden's doing.
Hot sauce in my bag?
Hot sauce. Oh, man. There was a lot of... Here, let's listen to a little bit more of this. Because let's move it up a little bit. This is, just shameless.
History. I have more African Americans in high places, including on the court, than any president in American history. But let's be clear. What happens to you and your family when old ghosts in new garments seize power? Extremists come for the freedoms you thought belonged to you and everyone. Today in Georgia, they won't allow water to be available to you while you wait in line.
Lie.
To vote.
Absolute lie.
What in the hell is that all about?
It's a lie.
I'm serious. Think about it. And then the constant attacks on black election workers who count your vote. Insurrectionists who storm the Capitol with Confederate flags are called patriots by some. Not in my house. Black police officers, black veterans protecting the Capitol were called another word, as you'll recall.
Yeah, you used that word before.
Extremists close the doors of opportunity, strike down affirmative action, attack the values of diversity, equality, and inclusion. I never thought when I was graduating in 1968, as your honoree just was, we talked about, I never thought I'd be a president at a time when there's a national effort to ban books.
A national effort? Is there a national effort to ban books? I haven't heard anything about that. Where's this national effort to ban books? And this entire speech was nothing more than pandering. Pandering because he's bleeding right now. He's bleeding black voters, particularly young black voters. There was a lot of controversy around this speech that Joe Biden gave at Morehouse because the students at Morehouse, even some of the alum, didn't want him there to speak. They didn't think that he was the right person to give the commencement. Most of the protests is because of what's going on in Israel and Gaza, but this is a CNN clip. I'll let these guys articulate why they didn't want Joe Biden there for themselves.
I feel like it's just a way to kind of get the black vote and the young vote. And
it's just a way to get the black vote. They're not stupid. They know that you're serving up hot sauce.
I feel like it's just a way to kind of get the black vote and the young vote and help his election, because I believe he knows that less and less people are in support of him, especially with his handling of Israel and Palestine and his banning of TikTok and the aid that he is sending to countries.
Ukraine.
And just the kind of economic state of the United States right now.
Some students have strongly criticized Biden's invitation, given his administration's support for Israel.
I'm not a fan of his coming here for multiple reasons. It looks very good on paper.
Listen to that. It looks good on paper. This goes back to what I was explaining in the last podcast with Jen Psaki, how everything's based on data and data points. And yeah, it looks good on paper for him to come. That's what this student says. Yeah, it looks good on paper. We don't want him here.
For multiple reasons. It looks very good on paper that President Biden is coming to speak at Morehouse College. It's considered very prestigious, whatever. But I think a lot of the seniors are suffering because of it. But I think, of course, ideologically, I think his being here, especially the possible conferment of an honorary degree, is very inconsistent with the values of this institution.
Wow, inconsistent with the values of the institution. That's real interesting, because in this speech, Joe Biden tries to say that Trump and Republicans are inconsistent with the values of Morehouse. But this student says that you, Joe Biden, are inconsistent with the values of Morehouse. Listen to Joe Biden here.
Not to write history, but to erase history. They don't see you in the future of America, but they're wrong.
They're going to put you back in chains.
We make history, not erase it. We know black history is American history. We know black men are going to help us lead us to the future. Black men from this class in this university. Graduates, this is what we're up against. Extremist forces aligned against the meaning and message of Morehouse.
Extremist forces aligning against the meaning of Morehouse. This student says you're the one who is aligning against the meaning of Morehouse.
Of course, ideologically, I think his being here, especially the possible conferment of an honorary degree, is very inconsistent with the values of this institution.
So he says that you, Joe Biden, are inconsistent with the values of Morehouse, and you're trying to place that on other people, but you're the incumbent. You're the one who they're angry at, and they did not applaud him. They did not stand. Some students turned their back on him. They weren't feeling the hot sauce. So Joe Biden is not doing well in the polls. He was with a group, and now so there's a divide in the black community. Joe Biden's still getting well over 60% of the black vote and black support in the polling, but 60% is not enough, not nearly enough. I don't want to go into that, but what he got in 2020 wasn't enough. And just another reason that I don't believe that the 2020 election was on the up and up. But so older black voters continue to support Joe Biden. It's younger voters and black men, particularly, where he's bleeding and who are not supporting him. So he gave the speech in Atlanta yesterday, but he was in Atlanta on Saturday night. So this was a meeting with older black supporters who do support him. And he's talking about the polls, and he's saying, that the polls are wrong, that the polls say that I'm losing, and the polls have been wrong all along. And this isn't the first time that he's criticized the polls. Listen to Joe Biden.
You hear about how, we're behind in the polls. Well, so far the polls have been right once. Now, look, we're either tied or slightly ahead or slightly behind, but
we're either tied or slightly ahead or slightly behind. He said, but the polls have been wrong all along. And what he's talking about is that I guess because they predicted a red wave in 2022, and I guess they said there wasn't a red wave. That's not what the polls showed at all. The polls were very accurate in 2022. The polls stated clearly that Republicans were going to win the House of Representatives. They didn't win as many seats as they should have, and I've explained this to you. It's because of the way the new districts were drawn after the 2020 census, but they won the popular vote in the House of Representatives by 3.5, 4 million votes. The polls predicted that. The polls predicted that in 2022 that the Senate was going to be tough for Republicans to pick up, and the polls were pretty accurate. So I don't know what he's talking about here when he says that the polls have been wrong, but this is something that he is consistently saying when he is confronted with people talking about the polls. And it's not just one poll, it's multiple polls where this guy's losing. And they're not just asking who you support in the election in these polls. They're asking other specific questions about who do you trust more on the economy? Who do you trust more on foreign policy? And he's losing horribly in multiple polls. But he keeps saying, well, the polls are wrong. Here's he in the interview that he did with CNN last week or the week before last. And again, when he's confronted with the polls, this is what he says.
The polling data has been wrong all along. You know, how many you guys do a poll at CNN? How many folks you have to call to get one response? The idea that we're in a situation where things are so bad.
Well, if the polls are wrong, buddy, why are you doing all this hot sauce? Why are you guys making calculated moves to increase your black support and making calculated moves to increase your support with young people by decriminalizing marijuana and all these other If the polls are wrong, why are you making all these calculated moves? Explain that to me. But again, the polls are snapshots, and the polls have been wrong before. Anyone who trusts the polls 100% is, that's not smart to trust the polls 100%. Yes, the polls can be a barometer. The polls can give you some sense of what's going on, but you need other data points. You need other information to tell you what's going on so you can make calculations based on that data, not just the polls. And there is no data model. There is no system for predicting a presidential election that has been more accurate over the last 40 years than Alan Lippman's 13 keys. I want you to take a listen to this clip. I'm going to introduce you to Alan Lippman real briefly, and then we'll talk about his model. We'll talk about the history of his predictions, and if we have time, we will get into what he is predicting for this year. If we don't finish up with it, we'll pick it up on Friday. I have a lot that I want to share. Let's meet Alan Lippman here.
This is Professor Alan Lichtman. He's taught history at American University for almost 50 years. He's a former steeplechase champion.
It's a race designed for horses, but run by people. Tic-tac-toe!
And a former quiz show winner.
I had a 16-show winning streak, won 4 cars.
But we're not here to talk about any of that. We're here because
Alan Lichtman.
Alan Lichtman is the Nostradamus of presidential elections. He's accurately predicted them for 4 decades. Yes, even that one.
Donald Trump sent me a note. Congrats, Professor. Good call, in his big Sharpie letters.
Now, Alan's ready to tell us who will win in 2020. But we'll come back to that. Alan Lichtman is certain we've been thinking about elections all wrong.
The pollsters and the pundits cover elections as though they were horse races. But history tells us voters are not fooled by the tricks of the campaign. Voters vote pragmatically according to how well the party holding the White House has governed the country.
Understand that his system it doesn't matter who the challenger is. It doesn't, that this is a binary choice. only two parties, and Alan Lippman's system only looks at the incumbent. So this video is about 2020. In 2020, Trump was the incumbent. So all of the keys related, except one, 12 of the 13 keys related to Donald Trump as the incumbent. It didn't, I mean, besides there's one key that pertains to the challenger, and quite frankly, it's insignificant. But everything is about the incumbent party, not even the incumbent person. It doesn't even matter who the person is. It's about the party, the incumbent party, the party in power, and if voters are going to rehire that party to govern for another 4 years. And like Lippman says here, it's completely pragmatic. Everything else, all the noise going on in the election year, none of that stuff matters. The only thing that matters are the 13 keys and the way voters will judge the incumbent, and if the incumbent deserves to be rehired for another 4 years, or if the incumbent deserves to be fired. That's the basis of Lippman's keys.
So polls are worthless?
They are snapshots in time. None of this, in the end, has any impact whatsoever on the outcome of a presidential election.
So Alan Lichtman designed a better system to predict presidential winners. He calls it
the keys to the White House.
And like some other politics these days, there's a Russian involved.
In 1981, I met Volodya Kailas-Borak. Volodya turned to me and said, "We are going to collaborate."
By the way, Volodya wasn't a historian or a politician. He was a leading expert in predicting earthquakes.
At this point, I thought the guy was either nuts or KGB.
He wasn't.
We recast American presidential elections as stability, the party holding the White House keeps the White House, and earthquake, the White House party is turned out of power.
So they got to work.
We looked at every presidential election from 1860 to 1980.
What they found were 13 keys.
All right. So let's listen to Lippman in this interview. This was after the 2016 election when Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton. Lippman picked Donald Trump in that election. I picked Donald Trump too. Now, back then, in 2016, I didn't know anything about Lippman or his keys, but I picked, and his system makes complete sense to me because I picked Donald Trump to win the election in 2016. I knew that he would be president after the Florida primary when he beat Marco Rubio. 2 weeks later, or 2 weeks earlier, before he beat Marco Rubio in Florida, he had beat Jeb Bush in South Carolina. So Bush had dropped out, and then he beat Rubio in Florida, and then I knew he was on his way to the nomination. I knew that once he got the nomination that he was going to be president because whoever got the Republican nomination that year, I felt was going to be president, not because I understood these keys, but some of the information in these keys were, behind me making the prediction. But in 2016, Lippman, using these keys, predicted Donald Trump. Everyone told him that he was crazy. And he explains a little bit, using the keys, why he picked Donald Trump. Take a listen.
There are 13 true or false questions designed to probe the performance and strength of the party holding the White House. And they look at the big picture. Things like third parties, midterm elections, scandal, social unrest.
Listen to all that. Third party, midterm elections, scandal. All of these things are measured in his keys.
Designed to probe the performance and strength of the party holding the White House. And they look at the big picture. Things like third parties, midterm elections, scandal, social unrest, the long and short-term economy, policy change, foreign policy successes and failures. And the keys made evident the vulnerability of the incumbent Democrats, who lost big time in the midterms of 2014, didn't have a sitting president running, had a contentious primary battle, had to deal with...
Who was the primary battle that he's talking about in 2016? Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders run in 2016. You remember at the convention, they didn't want to seat Bernie Sanders delegates, and they ended up walking out of the convention, and there was this huge fight. All of that triggers a key against the incumbent party. It's not the individual. Hillary Clinton, so that's one of his keys, is incumbencies. Everyone keeps saying that Joe Biden is going to be removed at the convention, and that because Joe Biden is not doing well in the polls and he seems like a weak candidate, that they're going to get rid of him and put Gavin Newsom in. And Gavin Newsom has already said that he's not jumping Kamala Harris. So if Joe Biden, Joe Biden dropping out and them replacing Joe Biden would cause more problems than it would solve. Because if they didn't replace him with Kamala Harris, you would have a full-on revolt in the black community. Because black women would be like, what? You're jumping Kamala Harris? So they wouldn't be able to do that. And if they ran Kamala Harris, she's sure to lose. So the incumbency key, so going back to 2016 here, because Barack Obama had finished his second term and couldn't run again, it was an open seat. You had infighting with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, battling for the nomination. So that infighting and not having the incumbency actually triggered two keys for Lippman in his model. Take a listen.
Of the incumbent Democrats, who lost big time in the midterms of 2014, didn't have a sitting president running, had a contentious primary battle, had to deal with a third party that looked pretty strong through most of the campaign, didn't have a major policy accomplishment in the second term, didn't have a big splashy foreign policy success in the second term, like the dispatch of bin Laden in the first term. And so my system indicated that Donald Trump won the election, not because of the Donald Trump.
It had nothing to do with Donald Trump. It had nothing to do with Donald Trump. It had to do with the party in power and those keys being flipped. It's like flipping a light switch. If you flip those keys for the party in power, it doesn't matter who the challenger is. I mean, once Donald Trump won the nomination, he was going to be president of the United States because the public they were going to kick the party in power out. And the only replacement for the party being kicked out is the other party. It's binary choice again. So because these 6 of the 13 keys were flipped for the party in power in 2016 against the Democratic Party, then Donald Trump, because he won the Republican nomination, he became president of the United States. It had nothing to do with the campaign he ran. It had nothing to do with anything but the fact that these 6 of these 13 keys in his model were flipped, and Donald Trump had won the Republican nomination, which made him president. So let's listen to the predictions. This is 2020 now. We were just talking about 2016. This is Lippman's prediction for 2020. Now, this prediction that you're getting ready to listen to is Alan Lippman predicting that Trump will be reelected in 2020 unless Democrats flip a couple of switches on him. They needed to fade. So there's 13 keys. According to Lippman, Donald Trump did not have 6 keys flipped on him at this period of time in 2019 when he's given this prediction. Now, this is 2019. This is, I think this is in the summer of 2019 when Lippman is given this prediction. This is before Trump is impeached. As a matter of fact, that's one of the keys that he recommends here in this clip. He's telling Democrats. You have to impeach. He didn't even have a reason to impeach yet. I mean, he starts when he's talking about this. He's talking about the Robert Mueller investigation and obstruction of justice, which is not what Trump was impeached for. Trump was impeached for some ridiculous reason, and they created this scandal around the Zelensky phone call. Remember, Nancy Pelosi, after the House impeached him, she held the articles of impeachment for what, like a month and a half, 2 months before she sent them to the Senate so she could have the trial going on at the beginning of 2020. So that would trigger the scandal key. He's giving them, Alan Lippman is giving them the roadmap of what calculations to make so they could defeat Donald Trump in 2020. He's giving them the roadmap. And so this is before the impeachment. This is before they release a virus from the lab in Wuhan, and we have a global pandemic, which the global pandemic, as you're going to see, flipped a number, 2 or 3 more of these keys, and along with the impeachment and COVID-19 flipping these keys, then that's why he changes his prediction later that Trump is going to be defeated. But in this clip that you're getting ready to watch, this is Littman, and he says that he's a Democrat. Listen to what he says. He is honest about the fact that he is a Democrat. Listen to Littman.
I'm a Democrat, and the toughest thing in being a forecaster is to keep your own politics out of it.
I am a Democrat, and the toughest thing in his system, in his model, is to keep his own politics out of it. And what I'm telling you right now, we probably won't get into it in this. Oh, yeah, I have plenty of time. We'll get into it in this podcast. I'm going to show you that this guy, the prediction that he's making today in 2024 about Joe Biden, he's having a hard time keeping his politics out of it. But he is a Democrat, as he's saying there. So in this clip, back to 2020, this is 2020. This is actually the summer of 2019 that Lippman is giving this interview with CNN, and he's making his prediction, but his prediction is a warning because he's a Democrat. He's warning the Democrats. You have to do this. You have to do this to switch these keys for Trump, or he's going to be reelected. Take a listen to Lippman.
He studies the past for a living, but Professor Alan Lichtman has also made a name for himself by looking into the future. The historian has correctly predicted the last 9 presidential elections. Look at all the faces on your screen, he called, from Ronald Reagan in 1984 all the way through Donald Trump in 2016's biggest political upset in modern U.S. history. Now Lichtman says, albeit with some caution, since obviously nothing is final yet, but that Trump will win again. But the professor also...
He's saying Trump will win again. This is what he's predicting. He's predicting a Trump victory in this interview.
But that Trump will win again. But the professor also believes Democrats do have a shot if they impeach him. So let's talk about that. Professor Alan Lichtman is with me now. Professor, good to have you on.
Same. Good to be on.
So you called it 9 times. 9. And you say now, and I know we're still early and this is not your official prediction, but you think Trump is it in 2020 unless what?
Unless the Democrats grow a spine and do their constitutional duty and move into an impeachment inquiry, and I think the evidence will show ultimately an impeachment. It's a false dichotomy to say Democrats have a choice between doing what is right and what is constitutional and what is politically right. Impeachment is also politically right. Right now, based on my system, there has to be 6 negative factors against the party holding the White House, the Trump party, to predict their defeat. They're down only 3. But an impeachment would nail down the scandal key, a 4th key. It might trigger other keys like a real challenge to his renomination or a 3rd party enough to defeat him. And let's not forget, impeachment is not just a vote in the House. It involves public hearings as part of the impeachment inquiry, and what everyone forgets, a public trial.
So listen to what he's saying. Listen to what Littman is saying here. So he understands. He didn't even have a reason. He's not saying that they need to impeach him for this reason because Trump did this. He's speaking he's speaking only from a political point of view. It's only politics for him. What Lippman is saying in this interview is that my 13 keys right now, I only have 3 of these triggered for Trump. And there has to be 6 for him to be defeated in 2020. So Democrats need to make this political move and impeach him, because if they impeach him, then the articles of impeachment go to the Senate. Then it's going to be televised every day. There's going to be a trial. It's going to be in front of the people. It may trigger more of these keys. So he is admittedly a Democrat. So he is giving the Democrats the roadmap, the calculations that they need to make if they want to defeat Trump in 2020. And boy, did they. Not only did they move on the impeachment for some very ridiculous reason, and Trump was acquitted. It didn't matter if he was acquitted by the Senate, just the trial. Listen to what he's saying. Just the mere fact of having a trial will flip this key because it's a scandal. That's what he's saying.
Involves public hearings as part of the impeachment inquiry, and what everyone forgets, a public trial.
See, a public trial. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter that it was a ridiculous reason to impeach. It doesn't matter that Trump was acquitted. You just have to impeach so you can have this public scandal. So this public scandal will trip another one of these keys, and maybe even what he says, trip another one. Like this one right here, number 8, social unrest. So he's giving them the roadmap to move on, to make their calculations on. Like I was explaining in the last podcast, they use focus groups, they use polling, they use all of these different data points to make calculations. Where this guy's giving him a data point right here. He's giving them this data model. Each one of these 13 keys is a different data point. He's giving them the roadmap. If they can change any of these keys, he already has 3 flipped. If they can change these other 3, then they defeat Donald Trump. And this one right here is social unrest. So Lippman in this interview saying that he's only got 3 keys that are triggered for Trump right now. They have to impeach, so that'll trigger a 4th, and maybe that 4th will trigger another 2. Maybe a primary challenger will arise. Maybe you'll have another key that is triggered by that. So he's a Democrat giving them the roadmap to success. Social unrest. Social unrest. So if they understand, if the Democrats understand Lippman's keys, and they understood it in 2020, then they would have had promoted social unrest, right? They would have actively done things to create social unrest. And boy, did we have social unrest in the summer of 2020. Did they create social unrest so they could flip another one of Lippman's keys? This is in August when Lippman finally gives his prediction. And I want you to take a listen to, so we just looked at an interview. I guess that may have been a year earlier when Lippman had predicted that Trump's going to win unless you guys, make a move on these keys. And then this is after the keys have been triggered in the summer of 2020 when he makes his final prediction, and he's predicting that the keys have been triggered and Trump will lose. Take a listen.
20.
And remember, an answer of true always favors the reelection of the White House party. If 6 or more of the keys are false, you get a political earthquake.
Okay, number 1. The White House party gained House seats between midterm elections.
Republicans lost the U.S. House midterms in 2018, so false.
Number 2, there is no primary contest for the White House party.
No Republicans challenged Trump for his renomination, so true.
Number 3, the incumbency key. The sitting president is running for re-election.
Doesn't look like he's stepping down, so true.
4. There's no third-party challenger.
Despite claims by Kanye West to be running, this is a two-party race.
This is looking pretty good for Trump so far.
Yeah, looking pretty good for Trump so far. These are the 3 that he had triggered a year earlier. So those are, or no. So 3 FOSS is what you need. So hold on one moment.
5. The short-term economy is strong.
The pandemic has pushed the economy into recession. False.
So understand that it was the pandemic that created the negative economy. It was the pandemic. So the 3 things that triggered the keys for Trump to lose, because Lippman says in this interview a year prior that he only had 3 false keys triggered for Trump. So he needed 3 more. So the 3 things that triggered the 3 keys for Trump to get to 6 in Lippman's model here are impeachment, COVID, and BLM. Those 3 things triggered the 3 remaining keys. He had 3 against him, and he needed 3 more. So impeachment, which Lippman advised them to do, COVID-19, which is what destroyed the economy, and BLM, which is what caused the social unrest.
This is a two-party race.
This is looking pretty good for Trump so far. Number 5. The short-term economy is strong.
The pandemic has pushed the economy into recession. False.
6. Long-term economic growth during this presidential term has been as good as the past 2 terms.
The pandemic has caused such negative GDP growth in 2020 that the key has turned false.
Number 7. The White House has made major changes to national policy.
Through his big tax cut, but mostly through his executive orders, Trump has fundamentally changed the policies of the Obama era. So true.
Number 8. There is no social unrest during the term.
There has been considerable social unrest on the streets with enough violence to threaten the social order. So false.
So now that Joe Biden is the incumbent, so this is all about the incumbent. So the social unrest hurt Trump in 2020 because he was the incumbent. Now do you see why the protests against Gaza, against Israel, and what's going on in Gaza, how it is going to hurt Joe Biden because he is the incumbent? If these protests continue throughout the summer, if there's huge social unrest at the convention in Chicago this summer, if there's huge remaining and protests and social unrest in the fall of next year when school starts again, before the election, because Joe Biden is the incumbent and the keys are about the incumbent party, that if there's social unrest, if this war in Israel and Gaza continues on through the fall of next year, then that triggers a key for Joe Biden because he's the incumbent. But in 2020, Trump was the incumbent. So social unrest was bad for him. And boy, so again, Lippman gives you the roadmap. He gives you the keys. All you have to do is turn the keys or flip the switch, whatever. If you are calculated and Machiavellian and you're creating situations to increase your chances of winning, then you promote social unrest. If you're a Democrat and you in 2020 and you wanted Trump to be defeated, then you would go out and you'll tell the BLM protesters, continue to protest, continue setting fires, continue looting and doing all the things that you're doing. The same things that Kamala Harris and the Democrats told the BLM protesters to do is what you would do if you're trying to flip the key. I want you to take a look at this clip. And if you guys have not seen this movie, The Fall of Minneapolis, you have got to watch this movie because everything they told you about George Floyd and the George Floyd situation was a lie. They purposely held back video and body cam video that would have given the public a broader narrative about what happened, how this guy had continued to resist arrest. He wouldn't get in the back of the cop car. He was totally belligerent the entire time. If they would have gave you that context, instead of just showing you the clip of the officer kneel down on his back and don't show you anything else that led up to that point and the way that he was behaving and the fact that he was on drugs and all that stuff, to give you context, they hid that from you because they wanted to shape a narrative, because they wanted the social unrest, because the social unrest triggered Littman's key. And you have to watch this movie, Fall of Minneapolis, if you haven't. They go into detail explaining what I just said. But this is a small clip from the movie. Take a listen.
When did you realize this wasn't a typical riot response?
Pretty early on, there was no response at all. They didn't say why, but I assumed they didn't want to make us look militant.
So I can't believe we're getting ready to get, next week will be 4 years since this event that you're watching. And it happened at the end of May. The video comes out of George Floyd, and the first protest that happened in Minneapolis, but they go from Minneapolis to the White House. I don't know why. The next day, the whole crowd goes, well, I mean, I don't know why. Of course I know why. It was well organized. They go to the White House and start from Minneapolis to Washington to the White House. And then they start, sorry about that. They go to the White House and start attacking the White House, attacking St. John's Church across the street from the White House. You remember Trump came out with the National Guard. He cleared the square, and then that set off the riots and the looting and Black Lives Matter for the entire summer. But this is the very first events in Minneapolis.
Rioters. I actually had gear, but they were just saying, just wear your helmets and stand there, basically.
Obviously, they didn't take my request for more resources seriously, so we were just watching it unfold without less than lethal, without SWAT teams, without riot gear. Nobody had protective gear on. We were just in our uniforms.
At this point, they're not giving
Who runs Minneapolis? Republicans or Democrats?
you permission to wear your riot gear?
No, there was no riot.
Who is the mayor of Minneapolis? A Republican or Democrat?
Given to anybody at that point, and we're in the middle of a war zone. It was just officer after officer. Injured, back in. Send them home. Injured. I mean, it was 30 officers that evening probably that got injured while they were out there trying to deal with the riots.
We were in a squad car, me and my partner, and we were at Chicago and Lake. And we had a observe and report post, basically. So we watched them with our own two eyes break into the T-Mobile store, Foot Locker, Chicago Lake Liquors. And we were given a play-by-play over the radio. And the only sponsor we would get back is just copy, observe, and report. We watched them loot, we watched them light the Molotov cocktail, and we watched them throw it into the building.
They're starting to throw Molotov cocktails.
We were ordered not to do anything.
Fire department wasn't responding, and we were trying to put out fires along, and cars were trying to run us off the road when we were trying to do that. All kinds of things were happening to our team. And it wasn't just me, but all the strike teams and all the officers during that time. The stuff that was going on, shots fired. It was completely utter chaos.
This was just kind of wandering around aimlessly, waiting to be told what not to do next.
Did you ever feel like there was a plan?
I am reaching to the command post over and over again about what's our plan, what's our plan, what's our plan, without any response whatsoever.
The plan was to get Joe
They're
Biden
not saying
elected.
Anything at all?
No, nothing.
Command, hold two copy.
Command, can you advise?
The elections were coming up. Everything's politically driven. They were going to use this incident for a political narrative, and they did.
Everything, it was an election year. I think that deserves, we need to hear that guy just one more time, say that one more time.
And post over and over again about what's our plan, without any response whatsoever.
They're not saying anything at all?
No, nothing.
Command, hold two copy.
Command, can you advise?
The elections were coming up. Everything's politically driven. They were going to use this incident for a political narrative. And
the elections were coming up. Everything was political. They were going to use this for a political narrative.
Driven. They were going to use this incident for a political narrative, and they did.
They were going to use this for a political narrative, and they did. They did. They used BLM and the social unrest to trigger Lippman's keys because he only had 3 triggered, and they needed 3 more to be triggered. So they needed the impeachment to create the scandal. They needed COVID, which people, they released COVID on purpose out of the lab in Wuhan. They told us that it started in the wet market with some pangolin and a monkey. The authorities in Wuhan, when it started to spread at the end of December, disappeared doctors. China would not let people from Wuhan travel outside of Wuhan into other areas of China, but they would allow travelers who had flown into China during the Chinese New Year in February, who flew into China, were infected, and then China allowed those people to fly from Wuhan to other areas of the world after the Chinese New Year, but they wouldn't allow people to fly from Wuhan to other areas of China. They hid all this information. They told us again that it was zoonotic and came from an animal. It came from the lab. It's pretty much, a fact today that it came from a lab. So the social unrest triggered a key, the impeachment triggered a key, and COVID-19 was the major trigger of Lippman's 6th key to get rid of Trump.
Number 9. The White House is untainted by scandal.
My favorite key. As I predicted, Trump was impeached. Plus, he has...
Why do they show... I understand why they show... This is the New York Times doing this. Why do they show Robert Mueller here when he says that Trump was impeached? As I predicted, Trump was impeached. What's Robert Mueller doing there? Trump wasn't impeached because of anything having to do with Robert Mueller or the Mueller investigation, which is what Lippman was when he was warning is what he was doing. When he was warning Democrats that they had to impeach, the reason that he was giving, if I don't have time to play the clips, but he was saying because of obstruction of justice and the Mueller investigation. But that's not why they impeached him. They didn't impeach him for anything having to do with the Mueller investigation. They impeached him for some stupid phone call when that Trump, held back weapons because he wanted to, make sure for whatever reason he held back the weapons to Zelensky. It didn't matter. I mean, Biden's doing the same thing to Israel right now, but it was a entirely ridiculous reason to impeach a president. Trump was fully impeached, but it didn't matter because it helped to trigger one of Lippman's keys.
9. The White House is untainted by scandal.
My favorite key. As I predicted, Trump was impeached. Plus, he has plenty of other scandals. So, false.
Number 10. The White House has no major foreign or military failures abroad.
We've had some very difficult moments with Donald Trump, but so far, true.
11. The White House has a major success abroad.
While Trump hasn't had any big, splashy failures, he hasn't had any major successes either. So, false.
12. The incumbent party candidate is charismatic.
Donald Trump is a great showman, but he only appeals to a narrow slice of the American people. And as a result, false.
So this one right here, that Donald Trump is not charismatic and he only appeals to a small group of people. I don't know that I would agree with this. And this is the charisma of the incumbent candidate and the charisma of the challenger are the only keys that have anything to do with the candidates. These are two of the 13 keys, and they both deal with the charisma of the candidate and in each party. And Lippman says in 2020 that Trump only appealed to a small minority of people and wasn't very charismatic. I mean, he is getting he's going to probably get the largest percentage of Black and Hispanic vote of any president in recent history. In 2020, Donald Trump didn't lose any of the votes that he got in 2016. He got 11 million more votes. So to say that he only appeals to a small minority, I don't necessarily agree with that. I want you to listen to this conversation with Professor Lippman, and they go into that topic specifically.
I'm going to put the keys up on the screen right now, and what I want to call attention to is that they are largely objective. In other words, there's really not a debate about them. It's not what Professor Alan Lichtman thinks, it's what the data says. But when you look at number 12, charismatic incumbent, you said that is false with regard to Donald Trump, and I know that half the country, at least 46%, would probably disagree. Speak to that.
That's exactly my point. When you buy my book, you will see the criterion for this key is you've got to be broadly inspirational to the American people, like Ronald Reagan was, who brought in all those Reagan Democrats. Donald Trump is a great showman, but as you note, he only appeals to a narrow segment of
See, okay, again, so Lippman says I'm a Democrat and the toughest thing is to keep your politics out of it. I mean, if Donald Trump is expanding his vote, getting 11 million more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016, if he is increasing the amount of minorities, Hispanics, Blacks voting to him, how can you say that he only appeals to a small minority? We're going to get back into this in the next podcast, and I want to focus on Lippman's predictions for Joe Biden this year, and we're going to look at his keys, all 13 of them objectively, and see what Lippman's model and what his 13 keys tell us about the upcoming election in November. I'm going to tell you that we're going to listen to what Lippman's saying today. I do believe, because he's a Democrat, he says, I'm a Democrat, and the toughest thing is to keep your own politics out of it. I do think that his politics are creeping into his assessment of the election using his own model this year. I think that he's having some trouble keeping his politics out of it. I'll just say that. The last clip that I want to play, and then I'll play us out and we'll get back into this in the next podcast, is this clip of Marco Rubio on Meet the Press this past weekend, yesterday. He completely destroyed Christian Welker. I mean, just absolutely destroyed this woman. But this is the end of their interview. And she's asking him if he's willing to commit to accepting the results of the election in November, no matter what. She says, no matter what. And he says, no matter what? Of course not. Of course I'm not going to agree to accept the results of the election no matter what. That's stupid. Why would I do that in May, commit to accepting the results of the election no matter what no matter what you guys pull. And he calls her on that, no matter what. And then she changes it, but she'd already put her foot in her mouth by saying no matter what. But what are these guys planning? What calculations are they making for November? How are they going to make sure that these keys in Littman's model are not turned on Joe Biden? Take a listen to this clip.
Will you accept the election results of 2024 no matter what happens, Senator?
No matter what happens? No, if it's an unfair election, I think it's going to be contested by either side.
Senator, no matter who wins.
I think you're asking the wrong person. The Democrats are the ones that have opposed every Republican victory since 2000.
Absolutely.
Every single one.
Absolutely.
No Democrat has refused to concede.
Absolutely.
Hillary Clinton conceded. Senator, will you accept
Ridiculous.
the election results?
Hillary Clinton said the election was stolen from her.
Absolutely. She said the Russians.
Senator,
We have Democrats now.
Senator, she conceded the election.
She said the Russians.
She said
that Trump was illegitimate. She said that the election had been stolen. Kamala Harris agreed.
Kamala said
By
too.
the way, there are
Biden
Democrats
too.
serving in Congress today who in 2004 voted not to certify the Ohio electors because they said those machines have been tampered with. And you have Democrats now saying they won't certify 2024.
She's trying to get that senator out. She's trying to interrupt him by saying senator, and he won't let her get a word out. And so she's like, Senator.
No matter what happens? No, if it's an unfair election, I think it's going to be contested
who
by
wins.
either side.
Senator, no matter who wins.
I think you're asking the wrong person. The Democrats are the ones that have opposed every Republican victory since 2000. Every single one.
No Democrat has refused to concede. Hillary Clinton conceded. Senator, will you accept the election results?
Hillary Clinton said the election was stolen from her and that Trump was illegitimate. Kamala Harris agreed.
Senator,
we have Democrats now.
Senator, she conceded the election. And attended the inauguration.
She said that Trump was illegitimate. She said that the election had been stolen. Kamala Harris agreed. By the way, there are Democrats serving in Congress today who in 2004 voted not to certify the Ohio electors because they said those machines had been tampered with. And you have Democrats now saying they won't certify 2024 because Trump is an insurrectionist and ineligible to hold office. So you need to ask them. I think have you ever asked a Democrat this question on your show? I bet you've never asked a Democrat that question.
Oh, man. These people are ridiculous. But what do they have planned? I mean, what is she talking about? Will you accept the results no matter what? Absolutely not. Neither would you. It's ridiculous. All right, I'll be back on Friday. Hope you guys have a great week. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please share the show, and I'll see you on Friday.